Welcome back to another episode of The Hit. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. Today on The Hip, I was joined by Tina Barnard, Chief Executive of Watford Community Housing. We talk about Tina's journey through finance and how she ended up in the housing sector. And we talk about how Watford have partnered with several local councils to form joint venture companies for housing development and other key initiatives in their sector. We also talk to Tina about her drive for sustainability and how they're trying to make sure that they've got green initiatives such as Green Panel to help with their tenants in terms of engagement. I also talk about what the future of the sector looks like, and I'm sure you're going to get loads of insights around Tina's leadership journey. If you like this episode, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. Tina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, James. Good to see you at last.
I know, I'm excited for this, and we couldn't manage it last time, but as we always like to start, do you mind by just giving us an introduction to yourself, please?
Okay, so my name's Tina Barnard. I'm Chief Exec of Watford Community Housing, which is a community gateway association, surprise, surprise, in Watford. I'm an accountant by profession, and I seem to be obsessed by being the chair. So I'm chair of Parasol Homes, which is a based organisation, but I'm also chair of all our joint ventures, which I'll talk about later.
Amazing. And talk us through the journey you've been through, because I always like to ask this, but how did you get into housing? I know you said you're accountant, and how have you ended up in this chief executive role? What's the journey?
So first of all, I never wanted to be an accountant because accountants are really boring. So I did a degree in economics. That's how boring I am. And then a second degree in economics, and got a job with a local authority. And my head of service at the time said, "Oh, you should be an accountant." It's like, no, it's okay. No, you should be an accountant. I said, no, they're really boring. It took him a year to persuade me to be an accountant. So from there, local authorities, it's just not my bag. I think it's too political with a large P rather than a small P. And I didn't get a job I was expecting. And suddenly our regulator, which was the Housing Corporation at the time, had a job for financial analyst. I went, oh, I have that one, and I got it. And that's sort of the beginning of my journey. I then became finance director of supported housing, 3 finance directors of large-scale voluntary transfers, even though at one point I said I'd never get involved with LSVTs because they're not really housing providers, and then became chief exec. But it was always sort of, when I was young, it was very much my plan. When I was at CHP, Chelm Housing Partnership, before Watford, I made the decision, do I want to be chief exec or do I want to be finance director of a much bigger organisation, and decided that I had more control, I thought, as chief exec. So I got the job as chief exec at Watford.
Love that. And what made you, or I suppose what drove that decision for you in terms of wanting to become a chief exec? Was that always the life plan, or was that just, it happened naturally?
It's about making, improving people's lives. I know that sounds very sort of, but I just think that, that's a real positive thing about working in the sector. And, I think I am quite a good finance director, but sometimes you're quite narrow there, and it's very much about the numbers and the numbers driving it. Becoming chief exec, you can use the whole range of your skill set. So it was actually a decision. I can remember thinking 18 months before I got the job, I'm going to be a chief exec within 18 months. So, I started to work with my chief exec at the time, saying, well, what do I need to be a chief exec? Talking to recruitment agents, so they knew that I was interested, and really planning that. But it was having that much wider remit than the finance director. But, there's nothing wrong with being an FD at all.
And what were some of the things that you had to change about becoming an FD to a chief exec? What have been some of the fundamental things that you've realised you needed to develop, or I don't know, that you needed to work on as a difference in the role, I suppose?
I think one of the big things is about letting go of your old role. I joke with Paul, who's my deputy, and he's actually the third finance director that's worked for me in the last 17 years, that I become an accountant when we go through the budget and financial plan. But the rest of the time, I actually leave it to him. I mean, I might ask the intelligent questions, but he's paid to be the finance director. So it's important that you leave your old role away.
Of course.
I think it's also then about developing, particularly, and this is very judgmental about accountants. We're accused of not understanding people and being people persons. So it's about developing that side, really making sure that you understand at a high level. You don't want to be able to, I mean, I could never be a housing officer, for example, but understand what it feels like to be in those roles. So when I meet all new staff at Watford, and one of the big things I ask them is about why they're there, what they like about the organisation and what they don't. And I think that's really important, so you can see what motivates them. So that's definitely be a big part of the journey. I mean, I do think, and again, this is a generalisation, but finance directors can be the best chief execs, because finance people should be looking at the big picture anyway.
Of course.
So it's really important that they understand the organisation. So a lot of the practicalities, but it is that softer side, I think, and moving away from your old role would be my two recommendations, really.
Yeah, and I think, really good insights. And I also think we talked about this off camera, but finance is absolutely the most paramount thing at the moment for every house. I've not spoken to a chief exec this year that's not said finance is a tough thing. So being able to plan and to be able to manage finances is a very important part, to be able to give leverage to deliver the right services and to improve lives, as you started with, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's why I actually got this chief exec's role a number of years ago, because it was a large-scale voluntary transfer. And at the point of transfer, you're 100% debt finance. So you need someone that understands the numbers. And of course, we've changed. We are, in effect, a traditional housing association. I don't think you can really talk about LSVTs anymore, even though I still use the terminology. Mm-hmm. So actually understanding the numbers and being really clear about, the governance side as well. So, I'm able to, I might not know them in lots and lots of detail. That's Paul's role. I'm not going to be involved with the Treasury side, but understanding and knowing those questions are the key points. And yeah, as you say, things aren't getting easier out there at all.
No, I agree. And just for the purpose of the listeners, can you just give us a helicopter overview of Watford Community Housing as it stands today? Units, like staff, that kind of thing, just to give us a flavour.
So we're small but perfectly formed, of course. So we have, and I hate the word units, so I'm going to go back to homes. Somebody asked me that at the finance conference this week, and I said, "Oh, no, I don't have any units. I have homes." He looks slightly embarrassed, but we probably have about 6,500 homes, 220 staff. We have our own in-house team as well. I think the big difference to us than when we transferred is that we also have a number of different entities. So Watford Community Housing is our parent organisation, but then we have two subsidiaries. One is called WCHT Devco. All that does is help us with our VAT recovery. More importantly is Clarendon Living, and that's our partner with our joint ventures. So we have 3 joint ventures. One with Watford Borough Council, so that's Hart Homes. One with Three Rivers District Council, Three Rivers Homes. Hertsmere Living, surprise, is Hertsmere Borough Council as well. So we've got that sort of more complex structure than we had 17 years ago.
Yeah, and I read a lot about this today, but just for the listeners' benefit, you've partnered with several local councils, as you've said. What's been some of the main benefits of going into joint ventures as opposed to doing it alone, if you will? What's been the benefits you've seen in that?
So, I mean, the big thing for us is about increasing our balance sheet capacity. So the funding comes through the local authority. I mean, we put equity into all the joint ventures, but in terms of development finance, that's actually provided by the local authority. So that gives us increased capacity.
Yeah.
But I think it's more than that. So, I mean, we set up our first joint venture with Watford in 2017. And that was at a time when a lot of local authorities were going down the route of local housing companies. And the conversation we literally had with Watford is, why do you want a local housing company when you've got us? And they had a big challenge about temporary accommodation, which at the moment the local authorities still have, and they have that impacts on their general fund in terms of etc. So the advantage for us is increased capacity. We're able to use our skill set in terms of development, housing management, maintenance. But for the local authority, this is a way they can help solve their temporary accommodation problems, which a lot of them actually have. I think the other big benefit, and it's sometimes hard to quantify, is that the fact that we work in partnerships. So, for example, a lot of local authorities have recently got Local Authority Housing Fund, which is funding for Afghan and Syrian refugees. All three local authorities that we've got a joint venture with, rather than going to other people, they came straight to us and said, can you work with us to actually deliver on this funding? So that was sort of a windfall fund for both sides. And we're able to get permanent accommodation for the refugees, which is, a win-win to everyone. So it's not just about the fact we've got a joint venture. They see us as a partner of choice. So when they want to talk to someone that's a housing provider, they'll come to us direct. And in a way, you can understand that for Watford because, of course, we came out of Watford Borough Council. But for Three Rivers and Hertsmere, they're taking a bit of a leap of faith to actually work with us rather than any other housing provider.
No, that's great. And you've mentioned the benefits there, but what have been some of the key successes you've seen? I suppose before we answer that, actually, how does it work in practicality terms, and what's been important to make sure them partnerships are successful? Is it communication? Is it having the right people on the board? What's been some of the things you've had to set up to make sure it has been a success thus far?
So I'm hoping no politicians listen to this.
We don't do politics.
Okay, I think one of the big things we agreed on both sides that we would not have politicians on the entities. So all the joint ventures are actually entities. So they're not for one scheme. They've got a rent company, which is for long-term management of the properties, but two of them have got also an LLP. So what's been successful is, as I said, that we like each other. And actually, I think that's a real key thing, that we trust each other. We've got this shared vision. So we all want to provide what's best for in South West Hertfordshire. But also, there has been churn on both sides in terms of personalities. Yet we continue to work together. So we've got both an operational board, which my team beneath me and teams from the council work together on the scheme. And then we've got the strategic board, which I chair with entities. But it is about, I like working with you, and we both have got the same long-term vision and agenda.
Perfect. And I asked it before, but just what have been some of the key successes? What have been some of the really key things that you've enjoyed, or you felt like you've won in that joint venture?
So, I mean, to me, I suppose the most successful one has been Heart Homes because it's the most established, but it's been really successful in terms of, we've delivered 180 homes that we wouldn't have delivered. And that's a mixture of temporary accommodation, but it's also shared ownership, outright sale as well. So that whole mixed community has been absolutely fantastic. I would say with Three Rivers and Hertsmere, it has cemented our relationship as well. So as well as us doing development for them, we also provide temporary accommodation. And we know that's a big challenge for all the local authorities, not just in Hertfordshire. So the more we can do with them, the better. So I just think it's nice that people see us as part of the solution, because sometimes there's a bit of conflict between local authorities and housing associations. And I think, well, I know our USP is that we work well with our local authority partners.
Yeah, and you're stronger together, right? If you get it right anyway, you've got more depth of experience, exposure, everything is better. And as you said, a stronger balance sheet to boot. I suppose on the contrary to that, and without being too negative about it, what have been some of the challenges you've faced having these entities and these joint ventures?
So I think some of the challenges have been there's been churn, both politically and also at officer level. So there's about, and sometimes that's actually good practice because you sort of step back and say, does this make sense? But there is that ongoing stakeholder management. But, I would say as an chief exec or even, a exec, key part of our role is stakeholder management. There is a bit about political elements. So particularly when it's, because all of our schemes have been land-led, is if it's a land owned by the local authority, development isn't always a vote winner, surprise, surprise, particularly if it's any controversial. So sometimes decision makings are slightly slower. And that can be frustrating when costs make sense. But so you have to acknowledge that things are going to be slower. And while as a housing provider, housing is our key service for local authority, there's a whole range
of course,
different things they want. So we may be sometimes lower down the pecking order. I mean, I would say though in Hertfordshire, I worked in Watford for 17 years, and when I first came to Hertfordshire, housing wasn't on the agenda at all. There's now something called the Hertfordshire Growth Board, which is all 10 local authorities and county council in the county, and housing is right up there. Everyone sees, whatever their colour, that housing is part of the solution to make it a vibrant economy. And there's lots of talk about Herts PLC and how housing providers and local authorities can work together to resolve that issue about affordability in the housing market.
Yeah, because people forget, don't they, with Hertfordshire, it is right on the edge, and Watford especially, right on the edge of London. I mean, it's such a difficult area to develop and so expensive. How important for you as a person and for Watford is it that housing becomes higher up the political agenda and it doesn't become this political football that we use to kind of pass around? Because I always think it should be part of main infrastructure discussions rather than it being this political thing. But I was reading something the other day that Manchester has a 16,000 person waiting list for housing. I mean, that's not reading very well at the moment when development seems to be stopping all over the country. How important is it for Watford, and how important do you think it is generally for us to continue to keep building through these problems?
I mean, I think the reality is, we continue to talk about a housing crisis and a need for 1 million new homes. We talk about 90,000 new social rented homes, and we're delivering less than 10,000 a year. So there's a massive, great need. But as you said, housing should be treated as infrastructure. And actually, we need long-term solutions in terms of both the plan and funding. You cannot build subsidised housing without subsidy. And I think the challenge has been that the level of local grant from Homes England has been squeezed and squeezed. We have an issue in Watford, as you've indicated, that we are so close to London that our costs are similar to London. So it's going to be much more expensive for us to build new homes in Hertfordshire than perhaps further north, north of Watford Gap. But we still get the same levels. So we're always having that conversation with Homes England. So for me, politically, whoever makes the new party in control, housing has to be one of those key points as well. I think on the other side, because that's about developing new homes, and I was actually at the housing the finance conference this week, is about the revenue side and rent, and the fact, my personal view is that setting rent should be done at a local level, not at a political level.
Totally agree.
What happened? I mean, I can remember 2015 when suddenly, -1 for 4 years. That that just destroyed so many business plans. And what happened is that we all stopped managing and maintaining our properties at the level we had. And now this has come back to roost with damp and mould, etc. So, we need some kind of mechanism to allow us to continue to charge the rent that makes sense for both the whole viability as an organisation and affordability for our residents.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can't agree more. And I've got a whole section I want to talk to you about sustainability. But before we move on and do that, as an ex-finance director and someone that knows the numbers well, how do we solve the challenge? So there's a lot of criticism from the media about housing associations, and some of it's rightful and some of it's not. But the main culprit for this is finances and funds for me. So we've got a net zero problem, we've got a sustainability problem, we've got building safety issues, we need to build more homes, we need to sort the damp and mould issue. There's a whole host, a myriad of things going on. But realistically, there's not the funding available. I spoke to a chief exec yesterday, and honestly, they haven't got the money to do any of those above things necessarily. How do we fix that? What is the answer financially? Is it more joint ventures? Is it more initiatives? Is it more funding? What's going to solve that issue?
Oh, simple question there, James.
Yeah. You just fix that and then I can send it to everyone on an email.
I mean, I suppose I could at least say, we are V1, G1 at this point in time. So, yeah. I think there's a number of things. I do think some of the big issues do need funding from government. So I know we're going to talk about sustainability later, but I don't believe as an ex-finance director you should chase money apart from when it comes to the green agenda. If we're all going to get to net zero by 2050, then we do need government funding. So I think those things that are imposed on us, we need to look at working either with the local authorities or with central government to get that funding.
Correct.
And, great things with social housing decarbonisation fund, and then they change the goalposts. So, that's the big challenge. In terms of other items, I think it's really important about getting it right with rent setting. To me, the thing that I'd really bang on about is convergence. So because of -1 for 4 years, our social rent is 32% of the market rent. And yet it's going to be very, very hard for us ever to get to target rent or to something more realistic. And so we would want to converge up quicker. However, for affordable rent, we cap at the local housing allowance. So actually, on average, our affordable rent is 66% of the market. And that's not affordable for a lot of our residents. So if we could converge down and able to have a rent envelope, I think that would help in terms of being able to look at different ways of achieving our finances. But at the moment, it is so top down in terms of that rent settlement that it's very difficult to actually consider the best way of funding items as well. And then I think then the other alternative, and we've seen this in the past, we diversify as a sector. We went into outright sale and we were making massive great surpluses. And then criticise, and we were making those surpluses. Yet those surpluses were there to cross-subsidise other forms of tenure. So it's about, at the moment, we seem to be getting a sticker whatever we do. So, yeah, we're all individual businesses and we should be able to set our own income and get some certainty from government.
I agree totally. And look, we're going to talk about sustainability now, but it's a hierarchy of needs, right? So I'm speaking to other chief execs of the housing associations and they're saying, well, look, development's bottom of the rung, right? We have to do building safety. We have to do the things that are essential and compliance. Then it's got to be net zero and sustainability, because clearly that helps the customer with their cost of living crisis. It helps with damp and mould. There's so many benefits. But let's just talk about because I know it's a massive part, but what's the longer term plan and targets for improving sustainability across your portfolio at the moment? What are you thinking?
So, as I said, that we're good at joint ventures, I think we're really good at partnerships as well.
Okay.
So we have a partnership called Greener Hearts, and that is with Settle, who are in North Hertfordshire. Free Living that were in the Boxbourne area, and Decorum, which is a local authority. And we were really lucky and successful with Wave 2 of Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund.
Right.
So we'd already got Wave 1 from the local authority anyway. So we will have less than 100 homes after Wave 2 in terms of below EPCC. So we've done lots of work. It's been about external wall insulation, cavity walls, and also internal wall insulation as well. And that's not called the right thing. Anyway, you know what I mean. Yeah. So we're fine. Well, we're going to get there about EPCC. We've looked at net zero carbon, and that's the big challenge, and that's where I truly believe you have to chase the money, and it's about getting buy-in from government and that surety that you're going to get that income. So we're not concerned up to 2030, but it is that up to 2050. I mean, the other big challenge is, unfortunately, we've only got 2 high-rise. But at the moment, we're looking at that in terms of air and ground source heat pumps, because we've got combined heat and power gas-fired system there. And actually, it's getting old. It breaks down. It's very expensive for both us and our residents. Yeah. But the costs involved in that are really significant. So again, it's about, working with government in terms of getting funding for that.
Yeah, and I think it depends about the profile of the house, right? So I was reading something the other day that actually in some cases it'd cost more to get properties to net zero than it would be to build them again. And I mean, we're getting into silly measures at that point if we start spending 40, 50, 60,000 pounds per property. I mean, it's not going to be affordable. Have you thought about any technologies or changes that you're going to consider as an organisation? Have you given that any thought as of yet?
So, I mean, and you're much too young for this, but it's the VHS Betamax conversation, isn't it? If you get the wrong technology, you're going to have to spend it again. Of course. I mean, we are looking at both air source and ground source heat pumps. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's something that we haven't looked at yet, and we know we need to, is solar PV panels. I mean, I was saying, can't we have it all the way down the high rise? But but they were explaining it would be too heavy. But I think the bigger challenge also is you don't want to be at the forefront of this, because if you get it wrong, literally you're going to just have to spend that money again. But and also we want something that's for our residents to understand. I don't know about you, but I've got a gas boiler. I'm not sure I'd know what to do with a no idea. Air source heat pump. So it's really important, that education as well. So we are looking at it, but to get to EPC, it's predominantly about, we had a lot of our properties were solid wall walls, so they needed insulation, and that will get us to EPC. But it is that next part to net zero that we need to really look at these new top technologies. But we're not going to be first in the queue for that. No,
and to be honest, I think it's going to be a case of everyone waits for someone to make a move in some cases. But someone's going to have to be brave in that. But you mentioned it then. The big thing that I bang on around sustainability is the engagement with residents and making sure they understand the technology, because I think we missed the chapter where we didn't engage at one point and we just cracked on, and EWI and all these other things started to happen. And then when we start getting into solar pumps and solar PV and heat pumps, they're going to have to understand how it works, because otherwise it's pointless. What have you done to try and engage residents from your initiatives that you've started so far?
So with Greener Hearts, we've got the Green Panel, which is a group of residents from each of the landlord that are really interested in the green agenda. I think the challenge there is, quite rightly, what's in it for me? So people are interested in what's happening for their home, rather than what's happening further afield in Letchworth, for example. But it's just a way of making sure that we really do engage with our residents. Interestingly, before coming onto this meeting, I was just looking at a presentation that's going to our board next week. And it was with our contractor, was talking to our residents about EWI, and it was a really lovely. It was on YouTube about people saying, yeah, this has made so much difference. My house is hot all the time because of EWI, and that's going to make so much savings. So I think those type of little, I mean, it's about a 2-minute video. If you can put that on your website and show people what a difference it makes, then I think that's the key element. So it's our main forms of, resident engagement. I think it's something that we do well. We've got our Gateway membership team, which is our tenant body, so they also go out to residents. But it's also those residents that have had that work done, and they're much stronger advocate than me coming on to say anything to any of our residents. So that's what we're using to ensure that we get that word out.
No, that's good. And I suppose from a resident perspective, it's quite intrusive, isn't it? So they need to feel the benefit, otherwise it is quite intrusive. Do you think this is the answer to the damp and mould problem that we have? If we can get the right technology, get more efficient, warmer homes, does that fix it or does it not fix it? I'm trying to understand, is it going to be the answer longer term?
I'm not a technical person, so I'm not going to say yay or nay, but, I would hope this is going to help improve the damp and mould.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
I think, for a lot of our residents, I literally today had this sounds very middle class, I had my Arga taken out. Yeah. And I loved it, but it was costing me an absolute fortune to run. Wow. And I was not putting it on because I was thinking, why am I paying all this money for this Arga? So, I can understand why our residents are wearing more clothes, etc. So if you've got something that's more, higher EPC, then you aren't going to need to put on the heating, and that definitely is going to, improve damp and mould. I think we just need to make sure there's not any fundamental issues in some of our properties. And I suppose, you raised that before about how much it costs to get something to today's standard. And I think sometimes as a sector, we have to make those difficult decisions and say, either we're going to dispose of this property because it's never going to be fit for purpose, or we demolish it and we build new homes. So I think it's going to be part of the solution, but I think we'll be naive if we think that's going to be the only solution. But the more that we can work with our residents, and as a sector, we've definitely seen a big increase in, concerns quite legitimately about people having damp and mould in their homes.
Of course. Yeah, and it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because if we stop building homes, I live in a new build property, and I can't remember the last time we put the heating on, because it is warm and it's naturally, they're built that way now. But you can see the benefits of actually getting more properties into the communities, because actually retrofit stuff, we're not sure if we're ever going to get some of these properties to net zero, so it might never get to the efficiency level. So like you say, it'll be interesting to see what excites you most about kind of current and future projects around this stuff, because it is nice to be thinking we're making greener communities, making homes more efficient. Like, what's the thing that excites you most about it?
Well, we've had this conversation a lot with our board, and I think our view is, the board and the exec is that we can't save the planet, but we can actually help improve the quality of our residents' lives. Yeah. And that's what's exciting. The technology doesn't really do it for me, but the fact that actually that can improve someone's quality of life is really exciting. And we forget that. I mean, I was just going to say, you may have a new build house. My house, it was built 1847. It's never going to be.
So your heating's on all the time.
It's never going to be at EPC. Probably, I think it's probably about E at the moment, but maybe a bit better now. I've taken the Arga off, but yeah.
Just the last thing on I suppose Watford for now is kind of in your role of chief executive. What's what because you've obviously got loads of enthusiasm for improving the communities and stuff, and that's lovely. But what are you really excited to try and achieve at Watford moving forward? Kind of what's the next few years look like for Watford community?
So we're actually now starting on our new business plan. So that'll be 25-30. We thought we'd tie it up with sort of the new rent regime, etc. And I think it's going to be a lot of more of the same. I think what we want to do, and I know it's really difficult, we still want to develop and we want to develop social rented homes if we can. And that really big ask. But it's also about working in partnership. I said I think that we work well with our joint ventures and also our partners in Hertfordshire. It's very much about us being Hertfordshire. We can't be everywhere. Like I said, we're small, perfectly formed, but let's do something fantastic for our communities in those areas that we serve. So it's a whole raft of different things we're looking at the moment. So a bit too early, but it is going to be about the fact that we're community gateway model, very much about listening to our residents, what's important to them. The fact that we do something different by working in partnership with the local authorities. What more can we do to improve people's lives? And just making sure we provide that really good service, because that's what matters to our residents. So, the whole repairs. Anytime you do a survey with residents, what's the most important service? It always comes up repairs. So we need to deliver that first class repair service.
Amazing. And just as we look to the future, a few last things I wanted to ask you. And it's not necessarily about Watford, it's your opinion, you've been in the sector for a long time. What does the future of social housing look like, do you think? It's a tough time for the sector. We all know that. There's lots of priorities and challenges. But what does the future look like, do you think? Is there a way through it? Is there a way to get to the other side that we're trying to achieve? What's your thoughts?
I think we are here for the long term. We do need to evolve. And sometimes, I can remember in 2015 when we had, 4 years of -1. It was just, to me, that was the most depressing time.
Of course.
I do think, with a new government, whatever colour, housing is now seen as being in the agenda, and I think we can be part of that solution. We will have to evolve, if it's us about working with more partners, or is it diversifying what we provide? I truly believe that housing providers, housing associations have got a big role to play, that community anchor. So, I might get down sometimes, but it's hard, but we will survive.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the big thing for me, and this is a massive risk, and I talk about it a lot in the sector, how do we attract people so that they choose housing as their future? Because, with technology, and my daughter wants to be a YouTube star, and I think most of the kids that I speak to in schools when I go and do community talks don't ever say, oh, housing's the one for me, or even construction, even broader than that. How do we attract more people to our sector? It's more exciting than it's ever been. There's more sustainability, different types of roles. What would be the answer to try and attract more people into the sector, do you think?
I think this is something we've struggled for a long time. We've always talked about it. I fell into housing in my late 20s. For us, we really think it's important in terms of apprenticeships. So at one point, we had only 2 members of staff that were under 25. We thought, my God, this is dreadful. So we made a decision that we were going to get more young people involved. So we've worked with the University of Hertfordshire in terms of graduate apprenticeships. So people that have got their A-levels going out to the schools, really talking about it as well. I think the other side then is looking in terms of not just, sometimes in housing we just talk to ourselves. We really do need we do need to go out there and start selling what's on offer, because I do think people don't know what it means to be a housing association. I meet with every single new members of staff, have a chat with them, and one of the questions I ask them is, well, what do you know about Watford Community Housing? And they might live in Watford and they still haven't heard of us. So we've really got to get our names out. And I don't think we do that individually. I think we do that collectively. The whole professionalism of the sector, the CIH has got to work with us so people can see that's a profession. But also, how do you engage with the accountants, for example? Working with SIPFA, working with ACCA, ICA, working with all those professional bodies, so they see that as a route to get to where we need to be. So it's something that I can't remember a time when we haven't talked about that, but I do think this is the time that we can, start shouting about what a great job that we do, and be it the milk round. I don't know if they even do that anymore.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, we use the milk round sometimes for stuff. Yeah, but I think as well we don't shout about stuff because we're scared that we're going to get shot down by everyone in the media. So it's sometimes better being quiet on these things and silent. The other thing that I'm spotting, certainly with some of the work that we're doing, is we don't advertise necessarily in a different way than maybe we did. I've only been in the sector 15, 16 years, but we're still advertising the same way as when I joined the sector, and maybe we're not reaching the people on the right channels anymore in that world, but we've got to do a better job. The other thing that I was going to ask you is, which is always really important to me, but I felt like this year there's been more chief executives step down than ever before that I can remember in any other year. And I think that's possibly because the pandemic delayed some of those resignations. But what I'm not seeing is that future leader program, that future development program to bring through the next generation of chief execs. How can we be better at developing future leaders? And how can we make it more desirable? Because you came from a finance direction. I think that's genuinely the perfect route. How can we inspire and develop the next generation of leaders in our sector, do you think?
I think the big thing is letting go. Actually, what success is that people do so much better than you, that you just say, okay, you run this. I know when I started, my accountancy, it was because my head of service at the time said, I trust you, and wanted to help me develop. So I think if you can let people develop and, give them that opportunity, and you can see that at conferences, can't you? They give you that discount for young leaders, but actually some of those young leaders, it would be fantastic if they're actually on the stage, rather than the same old. When I went to the conference this week, I hadn't been for 17 years. I still saw the same old people.
Yeah, it's so true.
And it's always the same people that are talking. Let's get some of those young people sort of talking, give them, and it doesn't matter if you fail. That's life, isn't it? We all have a bad day. And it's about, giving them the tools to enable them to succeed. And I think you're right. I think perhaps the exec level's fine. It feels to me like the assistant director, head of service, there's always quite a big jump between roles, and that's how, what can you do to enable people to get to that next role? And particularly with bigger organisations, I mean, it's fine if you can see a path through that individual organisation. For us, that's really difficult. So working in partnership with others, so then we've got a bigger critical mass. I think again that helps, and learning from each other, doing that leadership development programme.
Yeah, I agree. And mentoring's quite important as well, isn't it? About just giving people the right level of experiences and all the other stuff. Final thing for me, Tina, and something that I'm keen to ask is just what are you excited to just achieve in the rest of your career now? Because you've had a wonderful career in the sector and you've given so much to it. But what are some of the things that you'd like to see us achieve as a sector, and you personally, what would you like to achieve moving forward?
So in the short term, because I probably haven't got that long career. So in the short term, I would like us to be seen as part of the solution, and that's by the politicians. So, at the election, I would like us to be seen, yes, funding going in for new homes, etc., and we're there making that, making the difference. We've now starting on our new business plan. So, I want to see that started, and that's like, the next part of our journey. And when I do retire, I'm not planning to quite yet, but I want people to think, well, she did make a difference. She did something that changed people's lives, and and she was quite fun at sometimes as well. So that would be my thing.
Amazing. I'm convinced that you've changed people's lives, and I'm convinced you've had some fun along the way as well. And as you say, not retiring yet, and I'm sure not for a while, but thank you so much for your insights. It's so nice to speak to someone that You said it yourself, so I'm going to repeat what you said, but finance person with some real personality and some real people skills. But it must be proud for you to look back on some of the stuff you've achieved thus far. And I think it's really exciting what you're doing around the sustainability stuff. And I'm sure you're miles ahead of other organisations that are on the same journey. But thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
No problem, James. It's lovely to meet you, even if it's Friday afternoon. And of course, I had Daniel with me as well.
Lovely. Right, well, nice to meet you. Take care.
Thanks a lot, James.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.